nacerá, qui vivra verra.
By their 50th wedding anniversary, it seemed like Gilberte and Conrad Paquette had always been together. Through good times and bad, they remained a stable, calming anchor for family and their home, a welcoming place for all.
So our house was very, very busy. When you had the 10 living children and their friends.
And there was a fire pot outside, and everybody, it was quite a meeting place, lots of cousins.
The house was always full with people, full of relatives, friends.
And I keep thinking, oh, how did they ever do it? How did they ever get through all of that?
But get through, they did. And by the time they celebrated their golden anniversary, their children had enough memories to last a lifetime.
When we started school, we never knew a word of English.
The whole community was French.
In no time, we were totally bilingual.
You were expected to do the right things, respect the people around you.
We would be with our cousins and friends, and we would just skate for hours at the rink. It was just so much fun.
We could drive cars, trucks, whatever it might be. But we started doing that when we were 13 years old.
You wonder how you're still alive today.
We picked a lot of rocks on the farm too, roots and rocks.
They always loved to go back to Quebec.
It was French, it was Catholic. That's what she knew and loved. Dad and the boys would go out and chop a tree down and bring it, and a tree would always be a humongous thing. We'd all work together and decorate the house.
We learned how to play. We learned to work hard, but we learned to play hard too. I think the two are so important.
It's a small town. It was a fun place to grow up. I'd wish that on any child today.
The roots of the real story of Gilberte and Conrad began centuries ago, when their ancestors came to the New World from France. Philippe was the first of the Paquette in New France in 1631, and Clément first of the Ruel in 1675. They both settled where most French immigrants of the era first landed, on Ile d'Orléans, in the St. Lawrence River, across from today's Quebec City. As the island became overcrowded, many settlers moved inland until 7 generations later, they found themselves in Am-Nord, a small town about 150 kilometers south of Quebec City. 7th generation Paquette. Benjamin Paquette married Elzérine Dubois. They became the parents of Georges Paquette. 8th generation Paquette. Georges Paquette married Laura Paris in Notre-Dame-de-Ham, September 10, 1907. 9th generation Paquette. Conrad Wilbrod Joseph Paquette was born in Am-Nord, Quebec, October 4, 1912, the 4th child of Georges and Laura Paquette. 10th generation Paquette. Georges and Laura decided to move west in 1916 when Conrad was only 4. When they left Am-Nord, the family had a thriving maple syrup business, one of the best around. It's still in operation today. This is the house that the Georges Paquette family left behind. Very little has changed. The decision to leave Am-Nord was not easy, especially for Laura. Unlike her husband Georges, who already had family there, none of Laura's relatives had moved out west. Georges obtained a homestead in Debden, Saskatchewan, and then bought a quarter section of land. However, he ended up leaving his homestead undeveloped. Instead, they moved 300 kilometers southwest within the province to Rosetown, where the land was more productive, and started farming with 3 of Georges' brothers. For a time, Georges also traveled to Florida, where he attempted some short-lived land speculation. Soon after, he returned to the Rosetown area, but hard luck followed. Not only did the crops fail because of severe drought, his farm buildings were also destroyed in a fire. In 1921, Georges and Laura returned to Debden and lived on the quarter section of land they had previously purchased. They also reclaimed their original homestead.
Paquette Reunion Newsletter. Paquette Family Reunion, July 31st, August 1st and 2nd, 1987, Rosetown, Saskatchewan. We've thought about it, talked about it, and decided not to put it off any longer. It's going to involve a lot of planning, cooperation, and work in a short period of time, but getting the Paquettes together will be an experience of a lifetime and one you wouldn't want to miss for anything. You play a very important part in the success of this project. We will be holding the reunion at a Paquette family farm that will give us all the space and freedom we need. This facility is also allowing us to offer a full weekend at a very minimal cost. We are very excited about this reunion and are doing our best to make it a resounding success. Remember, this may be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and we would hate for you to miss it. No one likes to be told you should have been there. Sincerely, the Registration Committee.
7th generation Ruel. Joseph Arthur Ruel married Delima Dubois, and in 1886 one son was born, Amédée, at Saint-Julien, Quebec, a little town not far from Amnord. Joseph died when Amédée was still a baby, and his mother Delima married Édouard Bergeron. Édouard et Delima Bergeron. Delima's second marriage after the death of her husband Joseph Ruel. Laurent Lajeunesse married Mélanie Levasseur, parents of Alphonsine Lajeunesse. 8th generation. Amédée Ruel married Alphonsine Lajeunesse in Amnord, September 3, 1907. Alphonsine wore black as her father Laurent had just died, and she was still in mourning. Amédée was a blacksmith with a promising future. Unfortunately, he suffered from asthma, so a doctor recommended he relocate to the drier climate of the prairies. It was a huge decision for the young couple to leave behind their family and everything they knew. But Amédée and Alphonsine took the plunge, joining a group of young families from Amnord migrating to the western provinces in search of opportunity. They had 2 girls, Bernadette and Jeannette, but had just lost a son, Émile, who was buried in Amnord. And when they left Quebec by train in 1912, Alphonsine was pregnant.
My mom was conceived in Quebec. They arrived in July on the train. She's born in September. No house, no nothing. Left everything behind her. There was never any bitterness, but there had been hard times.
Amédée and Alphonsine left this house in Amnord and ended up living in a shack similar to this one when they arrived in the Shell River area of Saskatchewan in July 1912. In fact, this might have been one of the better ones. They cleared the land to build their shacks. This work bee was held to build Adélard Paquette's shack in 1913. The logs were pulled by oxen. When Amédée and Alphonsine arrived, family and friends organized a bee and built a small log shack with a sawed roof, which, unfortunately, often leaked when it rained. In September 1912, a baby girl, Gilberte, arrived, the first of her family to be born in Western Canada.
So we came down west, and there was nothing there, and that he wasn't a farmer. Anyway, there was nothing to farm with. So they built a shack, a dirt shack, with logs and then the dirt in between. So anyway, after a while, they had to come down to Debden because there was no business there.
From those humble beginnings, many others came to join, helping create a diverse French-Canadian community that worked hard, kept its faith and culture, and had fun.
We were from French background. The whole community was French and Catholic.
The mission of Debden had been established in 1917 by Father Voisin, a missionary assigned to the area. Monseigneur J. Edgar Joyal was the first parish priest, arriving on January 21, 1921. he wasted little time immediately organizing a building committee to construct a rectory. His priority was always the spiritual life of the community, and he nurtured a spirit of faith and trust in the Lord within his parishioners. 13 more children were born to Amédée and Alphonsine, for a total of 17. The family grew and grew and grew into adulthood. Amédée had to travel to different towns to work, like Marcelin and Big River, so the family experienced a number of moves, such as to Shell River and Ormeau Corner. In 1921, they bought a farm near Debden, and the next year built a blacksmith shop in the town. When Amédée's and Alphonsine's family started school, and the older ones were capable of caring for their younger siblings, the children stayed in Debden in a little house attached to Mélanie Lajeunesse' home, beside the blacksmith shop. On weekends, they returned home to the farm.
After many years, the Ruels decided to have a family reunion, as Mamie Ruel was 93 and Papa Ruel had already passed on. The first reunion was organized by Saskatchewan family members in 1982. The theme of the reunion was based on the 4 F's: family, fun, faith, and food. In 1992, the second Ruel family reunion was also organized by the Saskatchewan people. This one was held at Camp Victoire at Devil's Lake, and it was also very successful. Fun was had by all. The theme continued.
Que son règne est dissous, que son règne est dissous, sous, que son règne est dissous. Que son règne est dissous, sous, que son règne est dissous. Allons fleurir sa tombe, vole mon cœur vole. Allons fleurir sa tombe, un grand cœur est dessous, un grand cœur est dessous, sous, un grand cœur est dessous. Un grand cœur est dessous, sous, un grand cœur est dessous. Vive la Canadienne, vole mon cœur vole. Vive la Canadienne et ses jolis yeux doux.
The Alberta family members organized the third reunion in 1997. It was held at St. Basil's Camp on the shores of Pigeon Lake. The Ruel cookbook was unveiled at this event and was well received. Despite the torrential rains at this reunion, it was also a huge success. Father Enzo said Mass in the gym, and the Lamontagne family provided music.
Bonhomme, bonhomme, sais-tu jouer? Bonhomme, bonhomme, sais-tu jouer? Bonhomme, bonhomme, sais-tu jouer? Sais-tu jouer de cette flûte-là? 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 Flûte, flûte, flûte de cette flûte-là. Flûte, flûte, flûte de cette flûte-là. Zing, zing, zing de ce violon-là. Zing, zing, zing de ce violon-là. Tu n'es pas maître dans ta maison, ta musicienne. Bonhomme, bonhomme, sais-tu jouer? Bonhomme, bonhomme, sais-tu jouer? Bonhomme, bonhomme, sais-tu jouer? Bonhomme, bonhomme, sais-tu jouer?
The next reunion was organized by the BC family members and held at Coombs in 2002. The weather was fantastic. Fun was had by all.
C'est l'aviron qui nous mène en haut. C'est l'aviron qui nous mène, qui nous mène. C'est l'aviron qui nous mène en haut. J'ai point choisi, mais j'ai pris la plus belle. J'ai point choisi, mais j'ai pris la plus belle. Je l'ai fait monter derrière moi sur ma selle. C'est l'aviron qui nous mène, qui nous mène. C'est l'aviron qui nous mène en haut. C'est l'aviron qui nous mène, qui nous mène. C'est l'aviron qui nous mène en haut.
The last reunion was held once again by the Saskatchewan family members in 2007 at the Greasy Pig at beautiful Devil's Lake. Mama Gilberte, at 95, was the oldest one in attendance. She was delighted to see the theme of family, fun, faith, and food carried on.
Je vais vous raconter le tour qui m'est arrivé. Youpi, youpi, sur la rivière, vous ne m'entendez guère. Youpi, youpi, sur la rivière, vous ne m'entendez pas. J'y allumai ma pipe, comme c'était la façon, disant quelques paroles aux gens de la maison. Je dis à des limons.
Farming was a big part of everyone's life then. And even though Amédée was a blacksmith and Georges was more of an entrepreneur, living on the land and farming was the most practical way they could feed their growing families and survive. Then, as now, farm life had its perils.
Dad had a big scar. And what had happened is he was on a wagon of flour or something like that, jumping on top. His father was driving. And he fell. He fell underneath, and the wagon wheel caught his head and tore the ear right off. The ear's laying on the shoulder. But what saved him is there was sand, so it was soft. Grandma had the foresight. She cleaned it all up and put wet towel, and then they brought him to the hospital and they sewed it up.
Sustained by their strong faith and active social lives, both the Paquette and the Ruel adapted to hardships, accepted them, and made the best of their situations. They loved to have fun and enjoy many house parties, playing cards, making music, and singing.
Job topical, savez-vous ce qu'il y a? Job topical, savez-vous ce qu'il y a?
Job topical, savez-vous ce qu'il y a? Job topical, savez-vous ce qu'il y a?
Il y a une ville, la ville c'est Paris. Job topical, savez-vous ce qu'il y a? Job topical, savez-vous ce qu'il y a? That's it. That's enough.
Some were even practical jokers, like Conrad Paquette.
His parents, my parents, were coming from the same place in Quebec. And we went to school in Debden. And Conrad was so adventurous and said, never, oh, that boy was terrible.
She just said, I remember when he was at school, he had climbed the flagpole because the flag was twisted. Everybody was just dying because it's a very skinny pole.
He would climb up trees, he would do all kinds of stuff.
And one time he had brought a muskrat to school, and he'd hide it, he'd hid in his coat.
The teacher was very severe.
And when the teacher wasn't looking, he'd take it out.
Everybody, looks like that. And the teacher never noticed what he was doing because he would have got the strap.
Beyond grade 9, most children had to discontinue their education and go to work. So it was with Conrad, who left school at 14 or 15 to help on his father's farm. One of his earliest jobs was on a threshing crew. It was hard work, something Conrad would experience for the rest of his life. Gilberte really wanted to carry on with her education. However, her family was poor, so this did not seem possible. But the parish priest, Monseigneur Joyal, saw the potential in Gilberte and offered to pay for her grade 10, 11, and 12 education at the convent in Duck Lake. On one of her visits home during the summer holidays, she encountered Conrad again, and, as Gilberte described him, he was full of life and good-looking. Il était un peu gaillard.
And then finally one day, all in a sudden, he was in town and he wasn't feeling kind of good, I said, that poor man. And I fell in love with her.
After she finished her studies at the convent, Gilberte traveled to Saskatchewan to attend Teachers College, then known as Normal School. While she was there, letters from her mother, Alphonsine, supplied her with news from back home and a little life advice, such as not to marry Paquette because he did not have much of anything.
She begins, Mom was at the time going to normal school, it was called. It was a teacher's college in Saskatoon. and Grandma was talking about a friend of Mom's that had recently gotten married and was very well settled down. And Grandma says, et puis tu dis que t'as envie de faire la même chose avec Paquette? Elle dit, y a pas grand-chose, lui non plus. She says, your friend has settled down very well, and I hear you want to do the same with Paquette, and he hardly has anything either.
In 1935, Gilberte started her teaching career at Winslow Lake School, a one-room building in the small community of Mattes, about 15 kilometers from Debden. She also began a courtship with Conrad, in spite of her mother's advice. In order to go and visit Gilberte each week, Conrad and his best friend Wilfrid Bilodeau, who was courting her sister, Henriette, would often alternate borrowing a car from each of their respective families. Months later, on a beautiful moonlit winter night, covered with blankets in a grain wagon, Conrad proposed to Gilberte.
And we were going to an evening of fun to a certain place, Leclerc. It wasn't very far from my home. And then we were all wrapped up, with the fur. They put some straw at the bottom so it would be closed and we're covered and all that. And that's where he asked me, will you marry me? Oh. I said, yes, oui. I always loved that man so much.
They had a lot of love, but not a lot of money. However, as he would often do throughout his life, Conrad found a way to provide.
He started out early and when him and Mum were going to be getting engaged, he was trapping muskrats in order to buy her ring.
The wedding was set for the end of September to coincide with Teachers' Convention, giving Gilberte a few extra days off. That spring, Conrad rented some land and seeded it in hopes of making some money for the wedding. But the summer was dry, and it looked like nothing would grow. However, Gilberte said she had faith and continued to get ready. Finally, rain came, and Conrad was blessed with a bumper crop. He harvested the grain and sold it right away, netting him a good sum of cash, which he, some would say, overcautiously kept with him constantly as a roll of bills in his pocket.
He didn't know, well, what am I going to do with the money? Do I put it in the bank? Then he decided to just keep it in his pocket.
One Sunday, the two friends had to finish some chores at Wilfrid's before picking up their ladies.
And they would go milk the cows at one Sunday and then pick up the girls.
To protect his Sunday best clothing, the 6-foot Conrad borrowed a pair of work pants from the 5.5-foot Wilfrid. After returning to the house from chores, Conrad hurriedly checked to see that his roll of bills was still safely in his suit pants before he completely discarded his tight-fitting work outfit. After donning his shirt and suit coat, Conrad suddenly began to panic, exclaiming to his friend,
Wilfrid, I lost my money. I can't find my money.
Wilfrid observantly pointed out,
But Conrad, you don't have your pants on.
This anecdote elicited much laughter throughout that day with their ladies, as well as for years to come in their respective households. On September 30th, 1936, Gilberte and Conrad were married in a double ceremony with Wilfrid and Henriette. The 9:30 a.m. service took place at St. John the Baptist Church in Debden. After the wedding, Gilberte's parents hosted a special breakfast for their newlyweds. The couples had planned to drive to Prince Albert for their honeymoons, but it snowed the day before, and the roads were impassable, so they went by train. Even then, Conrad found a way to slip some drama into the trip.
They stopped in this halfway there, and Dad decided he wanted oranges, so he goes out into the town. They're switching cars, and all of a sudden the train takes off, and Mom said, she's like, but my husband is not. She's all door, and then they said, don't worry about your husband. But she said, that's my first time I used the word husband. So they got to Prince Albert, and they had to find a hotel room, so they got this hotel room, and it just had the half wall between them, the two couples. They didn't stay there.
After their honeymoon, Conrad and Gilberte lived with his parents, while he went back to work as boss of his father's threshing crew. Gilberte returned to teaching in Mates. They tried staying in a rented shack in Mates, but when winter came, it proved too drafty and snow often blew through the cracks in the walls. They left at Christmas. Gilberte temporarily gave up teaching, and they moved into Mémère Mélanie Lajeunesse' house in Debden, but had to move out when she came back from living with her daughter for the winter. Gilberte and Conrad then moved into another rented house, but that residence was sold shortly afterward, forcing them to move again. Their fourth move was to a house in front of the church where, in 1937, their first child, Bernard, was born. Mémère Laura Paquette assisted at the birth. During labor, the baby would not come. Monseigneur Joyal pronounced that when the bells rang at noon for the Angelus, the baby would be born. And so it was. Although Conrad had obtained land from the settlement board, he decided not to farm and, like his parents before him, opted to search for work elsewhere. Accompanied by Gilberte's sister and brother-in-law, Arthur and Bernadette Bertrand, Conrad and his family headed for BC in a Model T Ford, packed with 5 adults and 2 children. But things did not go well. They couldn't find work and were almost out of money. With the little cash they had remaining, they bought train tickets to Quebec. It was quite an adventure, and all with a baby in tow. They lived the winter of 1938 with Conrad's relatives, the Talbot. Conrad cut cordwood in bush camps. Then they moved to Malartic in the Abitibi region, and he worked in mine construction, a dangerous job where fatalities were frequent. To complicate matters, around this time there was also the fear of war in the air. Finally, in 1939, they decided to head back to Debden, where they built a small house not far from Conrad's parents. Gilberte loved this little castle, as she often called it. Mariette and André, their second and third children, were born there. Conrad went back to supervising his father's threshing crew. But, while farming may have been his first love, it did not work out well for Gilberte. She tried to help out, but struggled with chores like milking cows, often to the point of tears. Conrad decided they couldn't spend their married life like that. In 1942, they sold the house and started renting a garage owned by Conrad's father, Georges, and his brother, Paul-Henri, along with a small house nearby. That's when Conrad's real business career was launched. It started with him running the village's diesel engine power plant from dusk till midnight each day at a flat rate of $3 per month. Each Monday, wash day, he also ran the plant in the morning so women could do laundry. A few years later, before Sask Power took over supplying electricity to Debden, he decided to convert the power plant into a billiard hall. Conrad also started a much-needed taxi service, often driving pregnant women to the hospital in Prince Albert, as well as making frequent trips between town and the nearby reserves.
It wasn't unusual to have 30, 40 below weather. And you just think of the cars and those that you'd think in 1952, 55. She would wait so patiently all night, hoping he would make it back. He always did. Lots of taxi trips.
During this time, Conrad and Gilberte also bought a house. Finally, no more renting. This would become their permanent home and the place where the rest of the family would be born. Bernard, August 13, 1937. Mariette, May 4, 1939. André, September 24, 1941. Lorraine, August 9, 1943. Lise, July 15, 1946. Gérard, February 6, 1947. Jacques and Jean, July 15, 1948. Geneviève, February 8, 1951. Pierre, July 7, 1955. Florence, January 9, 1957. Conrad and Gilberte's family grew and thrived, with one heart-rending exception. In 1955, the newest addition to the Paquette family, Pierre, died suddenly, after only 1 week. This was a devastating loss.
She was so distraught. So she got a little table there and put the coffin on there. And I remember every night, I don't know how long we kept him in the house. 2 nights maybe. And she would put this Evening in Paris perfume in the coffin and then close it for the night.
When I walked into the house, the baby was in this little coffin in the corner of the living room. And there was a smell of lilac.
And I remember her being so sad. She said, "It's a child." And she would take a string and twist it through her fingers and then do this. She did that forever. And that was her way. And then she cried so much. And she never cried after that. She said, I had no tears left.
As a nun, I'll never know what it's like to lose a child. But I know that my mother suffered a lot. And her last years, her last months, she spoke of Pierre over and over and over again.
When Mom was upset and sad and needed spiritual help, she always prayed to Pierre because he was an angel, and also to Mère Mélanie La Jeunesse because she had suffered so much.
Life on the prairies was too often interrupted by tragedies and hardships, felt both in individual households and by entire communities. After 29 years of serving the parish, Monseigneur J. Edgar Joyal, the man who had made certain that Gilberte could continue her education, the priest who performed her marriage ceremony, failed to arrive for Mass at the convent one morning in February 1950 and was found passed away in his bed. This great loss was compounded just 1 year later, in October 1951, when the church burned down. The parishioners mourned these seemingly insurmountable losses. Even the sound of the bell was greatly missed, as it had served as the town clock for those days. It called people to prayer, ringing for Mass and all religious celebrations, and also let them know when someone had passed away. The bell tolled 9 times for a man's death and 7 times for a woman. Even if it was not known who had died, one could start praying for the repose of their soul. In a small community, it did not take long before all knew the sad news. However, like true pioneers with great faith, the people of Debden rebuilt. Father l'Abbé, an efficient administrator, organized them, and the whole community came together once again. While the sacraments, Mass, and liturgical and financial affairs were administered by the parish priests, religious instruction was mostly the responsibility of nuns and parents. In 1942, the Sisters of the Presentation of Mary were invited to come to Debden and teach. It was a dream come true for the town. After each day of regular public school instruction, there was 1 hour of French taught, followed by a half hour of catechism.
When we started school, we never knew a word of English. The school was in English. We could speak French during recess. In no time, we were totally bilingual. And at home, we spoke French because everybody was French.
The Sisters of the Presentation of Mary were a large part of the spiritual and educational life in Debden.
Lorraine remembers. I remember the hard work the sisters did in their help to rebuild. We needed a new tabernacle. Tickets were sold, and whoever sold the most tickets was to win a nativity set. Andre and I formed a business venture and sold the most, and we did win the nativity set. It was always Mom's pride and joy. I have it now, and it's my pride and joy.
The crèche was handmade by Sister Laurette, Presentation of Mary.
Thanks to dedicated pioneers and the religious orders, the Catholic faith and French culture flourished in the Debden area. While they did face many hardships and setbacks, Conrad and Gilberte also discovered opportunities and ways to succeed, especially when family helped out. When Conrad ran the red and white store, he arranged for Albert Thibault, a very good local butcher, to manage it, and he persuaded some of his daughters, Mariette, Lorraine, and Lise, to work there most Saturdays.
We had the little books, counter check books they call them, and everything was listed in there, and they would charge for a month and then come and pay.
Few of the children forgot the treat that they could get at the store by charging 10 cents of the monthly charge bill once all their chores were done. Monsieur Albert Thibault, the manager, always made them feel special. Even Gilberte, who was very busy raising her family and maintaining the household, tried for many years to help the businesses by keeping the books at the First Garage and Northern Motors.
It was about a block away from the house, so she would put me to sleep, me and my sister. Well, I was older, 3 years older, so I would wake up first, and then I would wake up my sister, open her eyes, say, "Are you awake?" and then drag her to the garage, crying. "Oh, she was awake, Mom, she's crying." But I knew where she was.
Gilberte was a good cook and definitely quite thrifty, wasting nothing. In fact, before Conrad could even take anything from the business's rag box, Gilberte went through it first at home, saving all that could be used to add to dresses or any other sewing projects. She was determined that her children be well dressed and frequently sewed late into the night to accomplish this, often using patterns ordered from the Western Producer newspaper or creating her own. What infrequent moments of time she had to herself were held precious, and she wasted very few of them. Like most women of that day, Gilberte did not have a bank account, only the family allowance. So, when she ordered COD from Sears, Army and Navy, or Eden's Catalog, one of the girls was selected to go and get the necessary funds from Conrad at the garage. While it was always exciting to go to the post office to pick up the parcels from these stores,
we absolutely hated to do that because Dad would make us wait for about 1 or 2 hours before he would give us the money to pay for the COD package. Mom knew what she was doing. She knew what she was doing. And so we'd wait, and we'd wait, and we'd wait. And while I was waiting, I'd play in the tires in the garage.
In 1946, Conrad expanded his business interest by taking over the Anglo-American dealership and building a big garage on Old No. 3 Highway. This enterprise became the main family business, even though there were several versions of it over the years, as well as setbacks, such as when the Anglo-American dealership burned down in 1949.
It was a car exploded, so it was gone in like minutes. And I was in grade 1, and then they came back. Your dad's garage burned down, your dad's garage burned down. So the teacher let me go home, and when I got home, Mom was crying. But it exploded, and it was gone fast, but nobody was hurt. And then he had nothing, no insurance, no nothing. He started getting a little shed, selling parts, and then the community kind of helped.
Conrad built a new garage that same fall, naming it Northern Motors. It included dealerships for numerous companies such as Chrysler, Massey Harris, and Anglo-American. During this time, Conrad continued to expand into other businesses. After buying a Dodge 3-ton truck and installing a big 6-cylinder motor with overdrive and manual transmission, Conrad installed a hydraulic hoist so he could haul grain, gravel, dirt, or manure for farmers. At first, his old case tractor and front-end loader managed to handle the work, but soon Conrad greatly increased the business's capabilities by adding a brand new John Deere Cat with a front-end loader. When Conrad felt it was time to upgrade some other vehicles, around 1955, he and Jean-Louis Bilodeau traveled to the Chrysler factory in Windsor, Ontario, and bought a new 3-ton truck, along with a half-ton, which they loaded in the box, and a second half-ton, which they towed behind them. Apparently, highway safety regulations were different then. all vehicles and riders did make it back home safe and sound. That winter, they hauled many truckloads of telephone poles from Candle Lake to Prince Albert. As Jean-Louis later commented, after they got the truck ready, he and Bernard were driving in style. They finally had a heater and signal lights. While he owned Northern Motors, Conrad established a bulk fuel dealership. At first, it was called North Star Oil. Then later, it became a Shell outlet.
In that little town at one point, there was Chrysler, there was Plymouth, there was Ford, and there was GM. And every imaginable farm implement dealership.
Over the years, automotive sales and service represented a significant portion of Conrad's business activities. First with Chrysler products in the 1950s, then moving into the 1960s with the General Motors line. Not wanting to ignore any opportunities, Conrad even had the franchise for CCM skates, bikes, and hockey sticks prominently displayed at the garage.
He sold farm fuel and baler twine and parts and everything.
The garage and the backhoe and the brush cutters, the farm, like the 4-line GM dealership, the bulk gas station. He had all those businesses all at the same time.
It is little wonder that Bernard became so fascinated by cars and the garage business at a very young age. Around 1954, he attended Gravelbourg College, but was soon back home, pursuing his interest in automobiles. Eventually, Bernard quit school and went to work for Conrad. In 1956, he began a mechanics course in Saskatoon under Northern Motors and C. Paquette and Sons, graduating in 1957. At 17, Mariette's main focus seemed to be boys and hockey, so later on, when she asked if she could go to the convent to take a business course, Gilberte and Conrad were both surprised and delighted. Upon completion of her course, she began working at Northern Motors and later at C. Paquette and Sons as the bookkeeper, replacing her mother, who had more than enough to do taking care of their home and kids. Mariette's responsibilities also included helping in the parts department, pumping gas, and of course, public relations, visiting with customers.
In Mariette's words, I have to say, having my business course and working with Dad gave me footing for the rest of my life. I learned all about dealing with people and treating everyone with respect. I am sure his motto was, treat people as you want to be treated. Be polite, be fair, be kind and trusting. Be patient and generous. I also witnessed his expertise in communicating and dealing with the representatives from big conglomerates like Anglo-American, Shell Oil, Chrysler, and General Motors.
When Bernard married Clémie Dumais in August of 1960, they settled in Debden. He became the garage's mechanic and continued to work there until it was sold in 1969. In 1959, when the highway was rerouted to the outskirts of town, they abandoned the old garage and relocated next to the new Highway 55. The garage was renamed C. Paquette and Sons and was a dealership for GM, Shell Oil, and farm machinery lines such as John Deere, Massey Harris, and Alice Chalmers. Eventually, Bernard and Mariette were joined by André, Gérard, Jacques, and Jean.
André graduated from grade 12 from Notre Dame College in Prince Albert. He then went to work for the CNR as a station agent. In 1964, he married Patricia Beatty, and they moved to Debden, rented a house beside Conrad and Gilberte, and he became salesman at C. Paquette and Sons.
When Mariette left for greener pastures in the big city of Prince Albert, Clémie took over the bookkeeping. After a term at university, Gérard returned home and became the parts man, a responsibility he upheld for the rest of his career. Although they were still in school, Jean and Jacques, the identical twins, worked when needed at the garage, and often amused themselves playing tricks on patrons. Customers couldn't believe how fast one boy could work, seeming to fix tires and pump gas almost at the same time.
He'd put his trust in his employees and give them direction and tell them what the job was and let them go. He got those businesses going, I think, by hiring good people and then put some trust into them and let them do their job.
Anybody could approach him. It didn't matter if it was a native, if it was a Swedish, French, it didn't matter. Anybody could approach him, anybody could talk to him.
The business was steady, often hectic, and so was home life, but Gilberte ran an organized and efficient home. Everyone pitched in and knew that chores came first, then homework, and last was play. On Saturdays, the house had to be cleaned, baths taken, hair washed and curled, white shirts ironed and starched, shoes polished, all in preparation for Sunday, the Lord's Day.
We'd do dishes after supper and everything else and couldn't wait to get out of there to go skating at the rink. It was just so much fun. Be with our cousins and friends down there, and we would just skate for hours at the rink and then come back home and it was time for bed.
Well, you didn't miss church on Sunday, period.
And there was never any question about that.
In the month of May, it was the month of Mary. We'd always go in the evening for the prayers.
Social events were also important. Baptisms, first communions, confirmations, birthdays, graduations, weddings, funerals, anniversaries, hockey games, family get-togethers, Sunday Mass, confessions, holy days of obligation, and who could forget John Deere Day? This was a huge event in Debden. The whole school had the afternoon off to watch a movie at the theater where John Deere equipment and other products were promoted. Everyone was treated to free donuts made by Gilberte and the girls and served by the boys who worked at the garage. Conrad was also very active in the community, serving as the mayor of Debden in the 1950s, a school trustee, a Knight of Columbus, and a member of the parish council. He was always helpful, often getting up in the middle of the night to sell gas to someone in need. His great sense of humor and friendly nature endeared him to nearly everyone whose lives he touched. Some of his favorite ways to relax were fishing, camping, daily naps, and playing cards. He always appreciated a good game of cribbage or Kaiser. And hockey. In those days, there were some intense rivalries with nearby communities.
There was a Big River and Debden, Shelbrick, but mostly the Big River boys, when they'd come around, there was always a little controversy.
One night in 1961, after a game with the team from Big River, Conrad returned home somewhat bruised and battered.
There he came home with a great big goose egg one time. He just got a skate in the side of the head.
He was so sheepish, I don't think. All I know is he didn't go to church the next day. He asked to babysit the kids. The back blew. Oh, he was all blue and swollen.
When the incident led to charges against the other combatant, the court hearing became a community event.
The guys that beat up on him were the other town, and they got charged because it was quite a fight. So there was a court held in the Debden local theatre, and those people from Big River and Debden, and that theatre filled right up. And the postmaster, who was also had the name Paquette, comes rushing to the garage, and he says, "Mariette, you take shorthand, don't you?" "Well, come on with me. You're going to record this court proceeding." Oh, it was an experience out of this world. The friendships and the rivalries continued, but not quite to that extreme.
Through his wheelings and dealings, Conrad finally made his dream of getting a farm come true. In 1956, he exchanged the red and white store for Leo Bilodeau's land.
We picked a lot of rocks on the farm too, roots and rocks.
Conrad seemed to relax there, being close to nature, and was very proud of his bumper canola crops.
I'd have to go out with him and help him to haul the grain, and he just about buried me in the back of the grain box one time. I was yelling at him, but he didn't hear me, and the grain's coming in, and I couldn't shovel it fast enough, and all of a sudden, he heard me.
Conrad Paquette was a prominent business figure in Debden, but not the only one. In fact, some of his fiercest competitors were his own brothers, the ones he had helped to get established years before.
He had the GM store on the highway, and his two brothers had the Ford store in town. So, I mean, there was nothing worse than Fords, and there was nothing better. Small town, and all these businessmen, and they all know each other, and all competitive, and all did well. That really impressed me as I got older, you know, that there could be so diversified and yet in such a small community.
Gilberte and Conrad always stressed the value of hard work and good behavior to their children, living out those values at work, at play, and in their marriage.
My parents' values were the same. Their personalities were probably different. There was just this give and take. Mom was more outgoing, although she was never a really talkative sort of person. Our dad was very quiet.
For the Paquette children, their success in the district was undoubtedly a byproduct of both their environment and their upbringing.
It was unconditional love. It just, you know, do the right things, treat people properly.
Mom and Dad really had values of pray, work, and play. And these values have stayed with me right throughout my lifetime.
Oh, Dad, very, very quiet, but when it was time to be stern, he was stern. And such a hard worker. And I never, ever, ever heard Mom and Dad have an argument. I never did. Didn't know that that existed. So totally respecting his wife. And Dad, just his presence meant so much. Didn't say much. He wasn't a man of very few words, but he was a tall man, nice stature, just nice.
And I did ask Mom later on, didn't you guys ever fight? She said, oh yeah, we argued, but in the bedroom. So then I remember thinking, my kids are going to hear me fight, just so they know that you can make up.
The children had a lot of respect for their father. He was a commanding presence.
The teacher at that time brought us into the office, me and a cousin of mine, because we were being jerks. She talked to us a little bit, says, and I'm going to phone your parents. I said, that's okay, she'll phone Mom. It's not going to be a big deal. But guess who answered the phone? Dad. And when he answered the phone, then I took the phone and I went, oh boy, I'm in trouble.
He was a great disciplinarian, just with his eyes. And when he spoke, you knew he meant it.
That evening I went home. And all he basically said, don't do it again. And that was good enough for me.
But along with discipline came encouragement, love, freedom, and opportunities.
I was between 10 and 12 at that time. I somehow got into the shoe shining business. And Dad had a box for shoe shining. So it had this box and it had all this stuff in it. And you put your foot on here and you shine the shoes. And so, like I said, I made good money. Like, for those days, that was really good money.
I think we got it from both of them, that we liked doing stuff for the community. If we could get involved in it, we got involved in it.
Freedom and opportunity sometimes led to some interesting adventures. For example, when the old Metropolitan car was no longer roadworthy, Conrad gave it to the twins. They got it going, mostly.
I always had trouble with the brakes. Couldn't get the brakes to work properly. A bunch of our friends would sit on the backside. They wouldn't get to stop, they'd jump out and hold it back.
When we were 13 years old, we were delivering fuel with a fuel truck. You know, cops were in Big River, so that was 25 miles away. Kind of knew which days they were coming into town. So all you had to do is drive from house to house and then fill the tanks. But we started doing that when we were 13 years old.
So we had to empty the fuel gas cars. They came on by rail. We had to empty that into the big tanks. The gravel truck had broke down, and we needed to take to Saskatoon. Then we're going to Saskatoon from Debden. There's a really long hill, a bridge, where it's really long ways down, long ways up. But all you had was a car to pull this big gravel truck with. So I was driving the gravel truck, and it wasn't running. We could drive it, have it running, but couldn't go by its own. All you had is the cars. I remember 68 Chrysler, and at the top of the hill, and said, well, better roll down and take it up to the other side as far as you can go. So he did. Wasn't that old at that time, Let it roll down the hill and all across the bridge and up halfway up the other side and hooked up with it again with the car, and it was quite a pull up. Got it to Saskatoon.
We were responsible to go get the Christmas trees. Dad allowed us to take this truck. I think we were 14, 15. Marcel Compagnon worked for Dad. And he said, well, we got some nice Christmas trees at our place, so, just go and get whatever you want. Marcel Compagnon was coming back from work, and we were going with the Christmas tree, and we met head on. Well, it was a total write-off, both vehicles.
At times, it almost seemed as if someone was looking out for these children, much like when Our Lady of Fatima Shrine was asked to protect all the Debden soldiers fighting in World War II. Each one returned home safely from the conflict. That monument is still there today. In the late 1960s, when only 2 of their children remained at home, Conrad and Gilberte invited Conrad's father to come and live with them. This new situation was enjoyed by all of the family, including Muggsy, the dog. Everyone looked forward to visiting with Pépère Paquette whenever they came home. He played the violin and was a good jigger. He also loved playing cards, and although he spoke mostly French, would count points in English when playing 99. For a time, Pépère Georges and Conrad played checkers every night, but Conrad was never able to beat his father. Then, mysteriously, their checkerboard disappeared and was not rediscovered until after Conrad's passing, when the house was sold.
Paquette and Ruel Ruel were also important people in Conrad and Gilberte's lives. They had their own little place nearby, but always showed great interest in what family members were up to. It was always a pleasure to visit with them, and Paquette Ruel always had a peppermint for his grandchildren. Mère Ruel had a prayer book, which also served as her diary. That little book contained lots of fascinating information about life in Debden.
Occasionally, Gilberte and Conrad managed to travel. In 1965, they took time to visit Quebec. On an earlier trip in 1959, they combined business and pleasure, taking a train to Detroit to go and pick up a car and then drive it back. Conrad's sense of adventure never failed, even when there were incidents on the way home.
They were coming back from Windsor, and there was a lot of snow in this town, and the train was coming, but they couldn't see it. And the good thing, they were going slow, and they hit the train and it got dragged. So they weren't hurt.
The years went by, brimming with family, community, parish, and business. But joy, sadness, and love also seemed to be constants in everything they did. Conrad was a very friendly, trusting person, sometimes selling a car on a handshake, telling the buyer, pay me when you can.
The farmers are busy combining and seeding or whatever, and he would charge everything for a whole month. He would carry, not only a month, probably 2 or 3 months, he would carry that in his books. Well, he needed money to support us and to pay those bills that were coming in. And he was so trusting, and then they would come and pay their bills in the fall, and they wanted a 10% discount, and he would give it to them. That was Dad.
Eventually, such gestures of generosity combined with changing economic times, began to affect the success of his business ventures negatively.
There was a lot of money that stayed on the books. That was probably one of the worst things. You know, just let it be. I'll collect it from him later. He was big in the barter system when he was younger. Trade wood for gas, oil, stuff like that. But then as time went on, barter system went away, and then it was cash.
In 1968, after decades of operation, the family's garage had to be sold. It was a major change for everyone. All the older children who had been involved with that business moved away to find other employment. Unfortunately, when the new operators of the garage, the Sear brothers, failed to meet the financial obligations inherited with their purchase of the business, Conrad once more found himself on the hook for this significant debt. But, as Conrad and Gilberte had done all their lives, they rose to the occasion.
My father once told me, you know, it's not money that makes you happy. We lost the money. People didn't pay their bills. It was a very difficult time, but all members of my family did get together, rally for them.
Eventually, in an effort to keep the business within the family, they approached their daughter, Mariette, and her husband, Charles Williamson, about buying the garage. The answer was yes. Charles and Mariette then moved from Yorkton to Debden, bought a mobile home, and started their new business careers. They renamed the garage Debden Motors, secured the General Motors franchise, and remodeled the body shop into Mariette's Lucky Dollar Store. Selling the garage took care of some of the money owed to creditors. Unfortunately, in order to meet other debts, the farm also had to be sold. This was very difficult for Conrad, as he had such a love of the land. Despite this ordeal, Conrad and Gilberte chose to remain in Debden, semi-retired, and continued to be involved in the community. A new adventure or challenge never seemed to be far away from these two. John Pompou, their son-in-law who worked for Indian Affairs, suggested that Gilberte apply for a newly posted job, teaching adult education on the nearby reservation. Her love for instilling knowledge rekindled, Gilberte applied, was selected, and went back to work in the profession for which she had been trained decades ago.
Dad would drive her to the reserve in the morning, and then I would pick her up in the afternoon when I was done school. And she just loved it.
Yes, she really enjoyed it. You could see the teacher in her.
Dad had no problem sort of switching into doing some domestic stuff, which he'd never done before.
There were also some laughs along the way, as their parents' roles changed.
Dad had never cooked before, but that year he had to start cooking.
Genevieve and I came over for lunch.
We sit down to eat. Well, it was gross. It was so bad.
We didn't say anything, but we kept looking at each other. Chew, 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 look at each other.
Well, we don't want to disappoint him and discourage him, but we just ate it.
We were raised to never say anything against your parents.
I said, Dad, what did you cook those carrots in? Well, that frying pan there that was sitting right there.
He cleaned the frying pan with Comet. I think he just put the Comet on and forgot to rinse it off. So the meat was cooked with this Comet.
Oh, we laughed about that after.
Strong faith was always a key part of the community's daily life. Home, church, and school all worked together in educating the children. Keeping their faith, the French language and its culture were very important to the pioneers, and they worked hard to make that possible from their earliest days.
We were from French background. The whole community was French and Catholic.
Christmas was always very special to the family. Every year they celebrated, and every year, as much as possible, they gathered together, with many cherished memories resulting.
Dad and the boys would go out and chop a tree down and bring it, and the tree would always be a humongous thing.
The whole feel of midnight mass was really, really, really beautiful. And you get back home, and everybody's excited. Like, it's lots of noise. It's lots of the party hats, and that. Like, there's tons of noise, wonderful noise. And yeah, And it's really exciting.
It wasn't so much the gifts then. It was, we knew we would get one gift. That was great. But just being together and Christmas tree, putting up the Christmas tree, we'd all work together and decorate the house. So then Christmas meant a lot.
Even while Gilberte was busy raising a family and running her home, she knew well the importance of giving to her community. Like many women of her day, her contributions started with little things, like making sandwiches for a funeral lunch, donating food and crafts to the annual church bazaar, working shifts at the same event, and also at the skating rink canteen in the winter.
On May 25th, 1960, the women from Debden and surrounding area formed the Debden Ladies Club. Mom was amongst its founders.
A lot of that was hard, because you get resistance, and there's jealousies, but she was able to overcome all that. The very first meeting, there was 51 ladies there.
From there, the Ladies Club grew and remained a staple of Debden life well into this century.
Ladies Club meetings were every second Thursday, I believe, or once a month, but I do remember it was a Thursday because it was a big deal to have Mom gone from the house. As a child, I barely tolerated it and got worried or irritated if she was late. The house didn't feel right for too long without Mom there. In later years, after they moved to town, Tante Henriette would go to the meetings with Mom, while Oncle Wilfred came over to play cards with Dad. Everyone seemed to enjoy that arrangement. I can still hear Oncle Wilfred talking about the womans going to a meeting and Dad grinning from ear to ear because he had a card partner.
Gilberte's contributions to the Ladies Club included many years of leadership as president and many hours of labor in other capacities. The Ladies Club was the main caterer for most weddings and numerous other events in Debden. In this way, the members helped make their group an essential asset to the community. Gilberte was also involved in the community in other ways. She helped to put on the annual Red Cross tea at the Debden Hall, where information about the organization was shared, donations were collected, and best of all, strawberry shortcake was served. Gilberte also supported the Debden Teen Club, which at different times had Lise, Gérard, Jean, Jacques, and Geneviève as members. Geneviève was the last president of the club before they closed the books and donated the money to the school library. Later, Gilberte supported Les Météorites, a local club whose purpose was to retain the French language amongst teens.
I remember her organizing a social at the Golden Age where the teens came to dance with the seniors. I got to dance with my Mère Ruel that night, as we shared an evening, brushing up on our French and enjoying the company of our ancestors. It was these sorts of things that Mom did to make her community a great place to live.
When swimming lessons were being considered for Devil's Lake, now Morin Lake, Gilberte became involved and helped to get that started. Swimming lessons are still a major event there today.
In the winter of 1964, figure skating was introduced to Debden. Mom became involved with that too and served on the board for many seasons, helping to recruit instructors for each season and also sewing costumes for the ice show, a big part of Debden's annual winter carnival. Mom and Germaine Brunette sewed many costumes for these ice shows. There was also a costume parade at the carnival. This was such a fun event, with everyone finding a unique costume to wear and show off as they paraded around the ice. I even think she convinced Dad to dress up once, but I don't ever recall seeing her parade around the ice herself.
Gilberte's chief motivation for getting involved was to ensure that the culture and history of Debden was reflected in the carnival's events and activities. Thus, log sawing contests and other pioneer-related tasks were featured. For a number of years, there was also a big push for selling raffle tickets, and the one who sold the most was crowned Carnival Queen.
Over the years, Lise, Genevieve, and I were crowned Queen, and some of our brothers' girlfriends also.
The bottom line? Many tickets were sold by the Paquette family. As her children grew up and moved on, Gilberte turned her attention to those who had first come and had founded Debden. She spent many hours tape recording their stories. Gilberte was keenly interested in the history of her little village. She believed that in order to know where you're going, you have to know from where you came. From this desire to pay proper respect and homage to one's ancestors emerged the inspiration to have a meeting place for seniors. She wasn't alone. In 1972, several seniors in Debden began gathering at each other's homes. From these meetings, they created the Cercle d'Âge d'Or, a first step in establishing an official meeting place. Pierre Pages and Gilberte began applying for grants to help build a Golden Age center. This early center began in Schrader's, formerly Ovila Dore's, old house. Eventually, that structure was torn down and a new center was constructed. Once the center was built, Gilberte felt it was crucial to designate an archive space within the building. She contacted many elder citizens of Debden for contributions to stock this small but well-represented room with historical items, each acknowledging the name of the contributor. Finally, Gilberte and a group of equally dedicated Debdenites tackled the writing of the town's history.
It was an incredible feat for Mom. It was incredible love. Mom loved history, so that book was a labor of love, but also a huge challenge. And Dad supported her through all of that.
Many hours were spent researching, interviewing, and preserving the stories of those French families who, in 1912, traveled from near and far with little more than their faith, culture, and, if they were fortunate, a few friends. Much of this was documented by Gilberte and others in the Debden History Book, which was published in 1985 in both French and English. It was a labor of love resulting from countless hours of volunteer work.
The history of Quebec, the history of Debden, and she wanted that to live on. That was very, very important with her. Very important.
When Gilberte was on this committee, she contributed many hours, chocolate bars, and much of Conrad's unshakable devotion and patience to this huge undertaking. He was an unwavering support, although he often worried about her because Gilberte worked so incessantly on this project.
She was probably as creative as Dad in another aspect of community, really, really caring for the community and making the community prosper, grow.
Dad really encouraged Mom when she worked on the history of our town.
Her efforts did not go unnoticed, though. An historian from her ancestral village in Quebec, Paul Vizina, made the trip to Debden and was entertained by Gilberte and Conrad in their home. Paul greatly enjoyed meeting with them since he was equally interested in history. It was exciting for all of them, making that link with the town of Am-Nord, from where the majority of Debden citizens had originated. Gilberte and Conrad got to learn about the area from where they had come, and Monsieur Vizina got to see where everyone who left Am-Nord had gone, a beautiful part of Saskatchewan to be sure. Gilberte continued to honor the pioneers by helping establish Heritage Days in Debden, an event highlighting and celebrating the work of early settlers. She also maintained a record of all area residents who died in an album at the Golden Age, along with other historical documents.
For being a busy household like we were, it's amazing how she was able to find time to do all that volunteer work at the same time.
Gilberte participated eagerly in activities at the Golden Age, helping to establish the first shuffleboard competitions and card tournaments. She and Conrad also took their turns, along with others, hosting social events there. They encouraged each other in whatever they were doing.
So yeah, they did camping during their retirement. Dad did Meals on Wheels in Debden. He helped with that. Dad also went and played cards every day. Money, a penny a point. Penny a point. Mom had a garden for many of the years. Dad still tinkered in his garage. He had a big garage in that backyard. Mom and Dad played crib probably every night. And then on Sunday they played backgammon.
And they took time to enjoy life, to camp, and to travel.
And they always loved to go back to Quebec. On one of their anniversaries, I forget, we paid them a trip. And that was one of their best. They had such a good trip. And they knew the people because they kept in touch. I remember Mom going to the falls, Montmorency. She always talked about that, how beautiful they were.
In 2014, Mariette, Lorraine, Geneviève, and Florence took the Quebec trip, visiting many of the same places their parents had in 1986, and also becoming acquainted with many of the same relatives. Another of the benefits of a slower lifestyle was that their children got to spend more time with them.
From age about 10 to mid-teens, I would go fishing with Dad. He was very, very quiet on those fishing trips. And I just came to just love it.
Dad always had the crib table sitting there by his chair, and every time he came home, he had to sit and have a game of crib with him right away. Played a lot of cards and visited with other uncles and stuff.
They also had a lot more time for the grandchildren.
Having such a big family that there's so many grandkids. I think it was 50 of them.
He always played with the kids, and so did Mum, and I would meet him, welcome when they came.
They were always interested to see what the kids are doing. What are they up to? Where, what's going on with them?
Our kid taught a lot of, pretty much all the kids taught a lot of their Mum and Dad.
Mom made a special gift for her grandchildren who graduated high school. A much appreciated Afghan, which she crocheted in their favorite colors. She even pre-made the last two Afghans, since she knew she would not be able to give them in person. Megan opened hers in 2014, and only David's remains sealed until his graduation.
In 1983, when it was time to choose a king and queen of the Winter Carnival, Conrad and Gilberte were nominated.
They decided to, since Mom and Dad had done so much for the community, they actually crowned them king and queen of the carnival that year. And they were in their 60s then.
So the crowning of king and queen, based not only on ticket sales, but on votes as well, was a great moment for our parents.
One of the highlights remembered by all of their children was Conrad and Gilberte's golden wedding anniversary. They celebrated it with the couple with whom they'd been married, Wilfrid and Henriette Bilodeau.
Mom and Dad had been married in a double wedding, and so it was a 50th anniversary for both couples. And the anniversary ran over 2 days. So there was the Paquette side of the anniversary on the one day, and there was the Bilodeau on the other. It was a really exciting day for Dad. I mean, he beamed all day. I think it was just his family was all there.
True to their Catholic and French heritage, they started with a mass and ended with a party, and even grandchildren were involved. Gilberte and Conrad had experience in celebrating such special events, as both their parents were also fortunate enough to celebrate golden anniversaries. During this period, Gilberte created all of the albums that chronicled the photographic histories within the Paquette and Ruel families. Lorraine has hauled these albums around many times back and forth. They have been touched, scanned, and put into categorized envelopes 1,000 times. In March 1990, Conrad went into the hospital in Saskatchewan because of some troubles with his leg.
And he was in just so much pain. As a family, we were taking turns being there with him at Saskatchewan and University Hospital. And my sister Geneviève was coming from Red Deer. Before she got there, he had a blockage and passed away.
At that time, this guy had been, I don't know if he was orphaned or whatever, and he said how he appreciated being accepted when he didn't feel accepted anyplace else, and how Mom and Dad had opened the door to him.
So when my father died, she wasn't able to cry. So at one point when she was by herself, she yelled. She just, so that the emotions could be released.
It was after Dad's death that Mom really started her rosary and praying campaign. Once she received a cassette tape of the rosary in French, narrated by Père Parent from Pat Sirois, she made many copies of it to give to her family and friends. It was at this time that Mom started her calendar of prayer for her kids. and she kept this routine of prayer until her death.
Every day she had okay, this is this person's day. You know, today I have a prayer for Jerry, I have a prayer for all the kids, and then the grandkids, and then but she was always praying for us. You know, I mean, some days I need a lot of prayers.
It remains an important part of many families today to continue praying the Rosary. There was a special Mother Riviere Novena for the granddaughters. And then Mama finished her nightly prayers with the hymn of Entrez chez Dieu comme on entre chez nous. An article entitled Rien ne l'effrayait was written about her in a French newspaper before she embarked on her next adventure. Nothing frightened her is the translation for that, and I think it really describes our mother. If she was afraid, her love for history, her community, and her family made her overcome any fear that would have held her back. She had forged ahead in the earlier years and made the history known in the later years. Our mom stayed involved in her community right up until the time she left Debden in 1998.
For a time, Gilberte lived on in the family home, but eventually it was too much for her to handle. She moved into Foyer Joyal, which by coincidence was on the same property as her father's old blacksmith shop. She often talked fondly about the birds she heard singing in the nearby field and the beautiful sunsets she admired from her west-facing back door. Many of the family gathered at her new residence to help Gilberte celebrate her 80th birthday.
The grandchildren performed a skit depicting the family doing the Rosary together.
In the Saskatchewan Senior in January 2002, Gilberte wrote,
Christmas started with Minuit Chrétien by Gilberte Paquette, Red Deer, Alberta. During my childhood and teen years, the highlight of Christmas was the preparation and going to midnight mass. Dad would rig up his best team of horses, Daisy and Topsy, decorate them with bells, grelots, and put fresh straw at the bottom of the grain box. We brought warm blankets to sit on. We'd glide through the crisp snow with the sound of trotting horses and bells under the beautiful sky. The church was lit up with buzzing gasoline lamps with special ones around the manger. Then we'd hear the beautiful hymns accompanied by organ music, such as Minuit Chrétien, O Holy Night, and Il est né, le divin enfant. The children would go close to the little Jesus and drop a few pennies in an angel statue that would nod back to us. After Mass, we'd meet cousins, aunties, and uncles for a short while, wishing each other a holy Christmas. Then we hurried home to a réveillon and then bed to give Santa time to come down the chimney with treats and our surprise gifts, unless you'd sneaked in closets and under the bed. We hung up our newly knitted stockings and waited until morning to get an orange, a few peanuts, and candies. An orange was quite a treat then. Then we'd get into our homemade or small Eaton's gift. We had Christmas dinner with Mother's special food, and the rest of the day was spent with our very appreciated new toy. I'm 89 years old, and now by myself. I miss my dear husband, Conrad, who passed away 11 years ago. He'd also be 89. Christmas, the celebration of the birth of Jesus, is still a great day, and I'm trying to keep the tradition along with my family of 10 children, spouses, 31 grandchildren, and 23 great-grandchildren. It's sad to say the real meaning of Christmas seems to have become too commercialized. Gifts aren't surprises, or small, and children tend to get whatever they choose. Most decorations and displays are no longer of Jesus and angels and inspiring nativity personages, which demonstrate joy and happiness, and it's hard to find greeting cards of a spiritual nature. It would be wonderful to bring Christmas back to the simple way it was, although very hard with the lifestyle of today.
Gilberte did work hard at keeping the traditions and the real meaning of Christmas alive. The Christmas cards she faithfully sent to her children and grandchildren were always well thought out and included a little gift or a picture of herself and Conrad. This helped the grandchildren remember them and see them in their younger days.
As she often said, we were young once too. Genevieve was a true partner in this endeavor with Mum.
Though she loved her little home, none of her children lived in the Debden area. Most were in Red Deer. So, after much prayer and debate, and even though she had become legally blind from macular degeneration, in 1998 she made one of the most difficult decisions of her life.
To move to Red Deer, that was a big decision for her. Big decision. And then also to leave because she couldn't go to the cemetery to visit Dad.
Gilberte rented an apartment in Red Deer and worked hard to begin a new life for herself. Her family helped make it happen. Her grandchildren were always a very important part of her life and showed their gratitude in different ways. One was to organize and fund a lifeline initiated and organized by Jacqueline every year, which allowed Gilberte her independence and peace of mind in the apartment.
She absolutely loved it there. She could go do her little shopping at the Parkland Mall when she wanted to, and without having to bother anyone. And then we made a little garden for her. Rachel made her, that was her job.
The siblings who lived in the Red Deer area shared in the care of their mother. Jacques, Rachel, Geneviève, and Lorraine formed a health committee to help take care of Gilberte's life necessities, especially in critical areas such as medications. Family members took turns taking Gilberte to Sunday Mass, then having her over for a day of visiting. Gilberte looked forward to these Sundays and knew exactly whose turn it was. If changes were necessary, that was always a little difficult for her. She had her heart and mind set on being with a certain family each Sunday, but as always, given a little time, she would adapt.
That schedule was an inspiration from above. Like Mom's favorite saying, Merci Jésus.
With her vision continuing to fail, eventually she had to leave her apartment. In 2005, she moved into Pines Lodge, an assisted living facility in Red Deer.
I'd go and visit that, and you know how your life is so busy and everything, and you get there, and it would just give you peace. You just feel so peaceful, and you think, oh, this is so great to be with her.
Debden remained a very special place for Gilberte. Her children brought her back for her 90th birthday celebrations. Her grandchildren also helped celebrate her 90th at a later date in Calgary, at Kim and Vivian Moody's place. At 94 years of age, she returned to Debden for her last Ruel family reunion. Keeping Christmas was a family affair right to the end of Gilberte's life, and once, at the age of 97, she played Mary in the Christmas pageant at the Pines Lodge. When Gilberte needed more care, she was able to come back closer to home to Prince Albert and be accepted into the infirmary at the convent of the Sisters of the Presentation of Mary, where she had been an associate for so many years. By that time, her daughter Lise was provincial superior of the Sisters. Gilberte sometimes commented that, at the time of my life when I have all the time to read, I'm going blind. When her vision began to fail more, family members worked to get all aids possible through the CNIB, Canadian National Institute for the Blind, including a magnifier reading machine which became more and more important to her. Gilberte was not afraid of technology, and she used all the tools at her disposal. In Gilberte's last year, with the help of Lise and Lorraine to put her sentiments to paper, she still managed to sign her Christmas cards. At that time, Lise and Lorraine asked her what she wanted for Christmas. She had her usual response. Il faut que j'y pense. Let me think about it. The next day, she asked for a small crucifix that she could hold in her hands, as she could no longer see the one on the wall. That was her Christmas gift.
A week before she died, she just looked at me and she said, I loved my vocation as a mother. And I didn't feel I was called to religious life, and here I am, dying in a convent.
On her deathbed, and we said, Mom, what do you like? And she wanted us to sing. And so we picked all the hymns that we knew she liked and all this and that, and just the French songs that we. And it was like, the heck with this, I'm singing. You know what? She had a good voice. She sang. Oh, she was so cute. Oh, she could hardly breathe when she was singing. Yep. She always said, when I get to heaven, I want to be able to sing and to have hair, because she had thin hair.
On December 14, 2010, Gilberte Paquette passed away. The family gathered to mourn her death and remember her life, just like they had 20 years earlier when Conrad died.
They gave us so much. They gave us the love, they gave us the tools to work with.
They were always interested to see what the kids are doing. What are they up to?
I think there was such a good balance between work and play.
And so there was that back and forth encouragement in what they were doing.
And Dad, just his presence meant so much.
Their parents are gone, but memories and the legacy of faith, hard work, and family live on in the children of Gilberte and Conrad Paquette.
They gave their today for our tomorrow. Ils ont donné leur aujourd'hui pour notre demain. To my family. My life has been full of joy, happiness, trials, anxieties, and a different stage of living. I am thankful to my parents to have given me faith to go across. I found happiness and love with my husband, Conrad, with our family of 10 children, Bernard, Mariette, André, Lorraine, Lise, Gérard, Jacques, Jean, Geneviève, Florence, including our little baby Pierre, who died at 7 days. What an angel he was. I still have him in my mind for help with Dad in difficult moments. We had lots of happiness with our family, including spouses, grandchildren, and greats. Many thanks and appreciation for all the magnificent celebrations. They are all very precious and appreciated. They will be memories. We also found happiness in participating in the community carnivals, figure skating, ladies' club, golden age, museum, curling, building of the church and skating rink, and the history book. All was done with contentment, pleasure, for the betterment of our little village Debden, the village of our ancestors. Hope every one of you will remember precious little village. Thanks the Lord for all the blessings. They are great. Wishing you all the best in your different missions. Don't forget the little prayer. Entrez chez Dieu comme on entre chez soi. Je vous veux tous à mes côtés. Amour, Maman. To my children's spouses, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, I am leaving you with love, appreciation, and many thanks for your affection and concern. You were all so great, and know God will guide along your way. I will be with you all the time. Tout mon amour, Maman, grand-maman, arrière-grand-maman.
Chambly, j'ai rencontré trois beaux gars du pays. J'ai fait risette aux jeunes, c'était le plus joli. Ils me clignaient de l'œil en me disant ceci: ah, les fraises et les framboises, du bon vin j'en ai bu. Croyez-moi, belle vive la joie, jamais je me suis tant plu. Ah, les fraises et les framboises, du bon vin j'en ai bu. Croyez-moi, belle vive la joie, jamais je me suis tant plu. J'ai fait risette aux jeunes, c'était le plus joli. Il me clignait de l'œil en me disant ceci. Il me clignait de l'œil en me disant ceci: venez donc, cher ami, il y en a encore à boire. Ah, les fraises et les framboises, du bon vin j'en ai bu. Croyez-moi, belle vive la joie, jamais je me suis tant plu. Ah, les fraises et les framboises, du bon vin j'en ai bu. Croyez-moi, belle vive la joie, jamais je me suis tant plu. Aux jeunes, c'était le plus joli. Il me clignait de l'œil en me disant ceci: venez donc, cher ami, il y en a encore à boire. Venez donc, cher ami, il y en a encore à boire. Ah, les fraises et les framboises, du bon vin j'en ai bu. Croyez-moi, belle vive la joie, jamais je me suis tant plu. Ah, les fraises et les framboises, du bon vin j'en ai bu. Croyez-moi, belle vive la joie, jamais je me suis tant plu. Ah, les fraises et les framboises, du bon vin j'en ai bu. Croyez-moi, belle vive la joie, jamais je me suis tant plu.
Saturday night I got married. Me and my wife settled down. Now me and my wife are parted. I'm gonna take another stroll downtown. Irene, good night. Irene, good night. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dreams.
Sometimes I live in the country. Sometimes I live in town. Sometimes I take a great notion to jump into the river and drown. Irene, good night. Irene, good night. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dreams.
Stop rambling, stop your gambling, stop staying out late at night. Go home to your wife and family, stay there by your fireside bright.
I